Good evening and welcome to the Bracket Release Show presented by bet365. I'm Stuckey, and joining me tonight, my fellow Big Bets on Campus podcast co-hosts Mike Calabrese and Greg Waddell. We have a bracket that we will obsess over for the next 3 to 4 days, every minute. That's all I'll be thinking about. And we will get into that bracket. We'll give our first reactions to just the bracket in general, and then we'll go region by region, giving some first look picks, our favorite upset of the first round, and we'll even provide our initial final fours. But I will say firsthand, I'm about 0.1% of the way done going through these games. So mine could subject to change, but I will tweet out my final four and share it on the podcast we'll have later in the week after going through these games more in depth. But gentlemen, it's the best time of the year. We have the actual bracket. I personally have done something that I've always done since I was a little kid. I still get out a notebook and marker and make the bracket and fill it in, even though it'll be available online within 2 seconds. It just brings me a lot of joy and nostalgia. So, Greg, I'll go to you first. Give me your initial reactions on this bracket and the tournament at large.
So for the sake of vibes, I'm going to start positively, but it's my second biggest reaction. Then I'll get to the negative one. The positive, they gave us some fun drama. Like we could get Jeremy Roach versus Duke, followed by Caleb Love versus Duke in the first 3 rounds of this tournament. I adore the concept of that. We have John Calipari versus Bill Self for the right to face Rick Pitino. I adore the concept of that. You pair Kentucky and Illinois in the same pot. I know they got to get through a couple, I think, dicey matchups in the round of 64 potentially. But if they get there, that game's going to be electric. And two of the biggest boomer bust teams in the country will deliver great entertainment value. And lastly, you've got Auburn versus Louisville in the state of Kentucky in the round of 32 with the way Auburn's been. Like, there is just some grab your popcorn potential matchups this year. There always are, but it felt more so this year, and I'm very excited for it as a fan. Now to the negative quickly, my biggest reaction. Does the committee want to do their job? When do they phone it in? Do they just decide on like Friday afternoon that they're going to do the work for the rest of the weekend and go golfing or something? I don't understand how North Carolina makes this tournament unless they were evaluating this as if North Carolina was still playing in the ACC tournament right now. There's a bunch of teams you can go down the list that just their placements don't make any sense if you're paying any attention to Saturday or Sunday. If you're not, fine. But clearly they're not. We've known this for a couple of years. I just feel like it's been even more emphatic this year. It's not just Sunday's results that don't matter. It's Saturday's results that don't matter in a lot of cases. And it's crazy to me. North Carolina specifically in this tournament is crazy to me.
Yeah, well, at least the AD, wink, wink, left the room for that discussion. I have my suspicions about that, but yeah, I was shocked that UNC was in, West Virginia was not in, and that was the first time. What did I see? The first time that a team that was in the field in all 111 brackets on Bracket Project and didn't make it. First time ever. Committee pointed to the DeVries injury, which I figured they would, and the fact that West Virginia hasn't beat a tournament team since mid-January against Iowa State. But that was shocking. I thought maybe there was a chance West Virginia got left out, but I didn't think UNC would get in and West Virginia would get left out. Pretty wild to me. But you mentioned Louisville. That's one of my takeaways. They kind of got robbed. Getting the 8 seed in Lexington against the number 1 overall seed, although Auburn kind of stumbled down the stretch a bit, but that's not a great job. That to me, that was like, all right, well, we don't really respect the ACC, but then UNC got in. So
and stuck Clemson. Like, did we not pay attention to Louisville Clemson in the tournament on Saturday night or whatever night it was, right? Like, if conference tournament games don't matter anymore, let's not play them. We lost so many good players to injury this week. You have to factor this in as if it matters. And you're right. Even just teams 2 seed lines off from what they should be, I feel like it's happening all over this bracket.
Yeah, and who else? Who got shipped out to Wisconsin? Uh, they obviously had no legs today. What did they go? 7 of 40 from three or something? 4 in 4 days. Get shipped out to altitude to potentially on a Thursday potentially play back-to-back altitude teams if they win. That's brutal. While Kentucky got the three in Milwaukee that I'm sure a lot of Wisconsin fans thought or were hoping to get for the Badgers. So that definitely was not a great draw and result for Wisconsin. We'll see how they can bounce back
Stuck,
after
let me
that
go fandom. I'm just
grueling weekend.
piling on. Michigan, who wins the tournament, beat Purdue 3 rounds ago by what, 18? Gets a 5 seed and has to go to altitude on Thursday to get the best mid-major team we've seen in years. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense how Purdue was locked in at a 4 to me over a Michigan team that punked them 3 days ago.
It's a great point because, and I'll get into this shortly with UC San Diego. All I heard from Michigan fans when Michigan got destroyed by Illinois is the discourse from Michigan fans was, oh, well, it was our fourth game in 9 days or something. You would know, Greg, right? Was that fourth game in 9 days?
4 and 9, correct.
So fourth game in 9 days, we don't have great depth. Well, this will be the fourth game in 8 days in altitude without great depth.
Yeah.
So yeah, not great for Michigan and some of their issues, which could be exposed against UC San Diego, which we'll get to in a bit. Calabrese, how about you? What are some takeaways you have from the bracket?
Well, to kind of piggyback on what you were saying about the tactile nature of filling out your bracket, it takes me back to my first year at prep school and the Monday morning after the official bracket came out, and I see a bunch of seniors stealing supplies. They got toner cartridges, they got printer paper, they got a physical copy of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and we had this disciplinarian librarian, and she just came out and she's like, "What are you guys doing?" And they're like, "Oh, we have to print out like 1,000 brackets and just hand them out." And just stony face, she was like, "All right, just make sure you get 5 on my desk." Like the fact is, it took over the entire school for that entire week, and it's something that it's still very near and dear to my heart. In terms of this field, though, there's plenty to dump on the committee for. I think you guys have already touched on it. So I'm going to go slightly in the opposite direction. This is just a bumper crop of teams from the 12 line through the 16 line. 11 teams between 12 and 16 in the seeding were number one seeds in their conference tournament and won them. And that doesn't even include super dangerous teams like Grand Canyon, UNC Wilmington that won 26 and 27 games respectively. There's just so many of these teams that are not only super experienced. They went through the gauntlet, winning regular season titles, won their conference tournament title, but they also bring something special to the table. You can go down the list. UC San Diego leads the nation in turnover margin. McNeese leads the country in kill shot runs. There's no hotter team really across the entire country than Colorado State. They've won 10 straight games by 17 points per game, and now they're in as a 12 seed. They're actually going to go off as a favorite depending on injury situation here with Penny's Memphis team. Liberty and Yale, they could knock down 15 threes and make it to, the Sweet 16. That wouldn't shock me. Even a team like Troy. Troy is going to, really give Kentucky problems on the offensive glass. They're also top 5 in rim and 3-point rate in the entire country. And, the list goes on and on and on, but I'm just really excited because there's a lot of years where we have bid stealers and there's some teams that are just cannon fodder. But really, I mean, this is going to be a really interesting round of 64, at least for my money. I know I'm going to be on a lot of these teams plus the points, and certainly there's going to be opportunities to hit some huge money line parlays, round robins, because when you start putting some of these experienced teams that won 26, 27, 28 games, I don't think they're going to be scared up against, teams outside of the Duke, Houston, and Auburns of the world. So I can't wait to dig into it. And I agree with you, Stuck. I'm just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the prep and handicapping that needs to be done in the next 36 hours.
Yeah, no sleep anytime soon. I, yeah, I'm excited for a lot of these first round matchups, and the one thing that we'll also have to spend time on, Greg, you mentioned this, is the injuries. There's a lot of key potential injuries and injury news for some of these high seeds that will definitely be worth monitoring and could play a part in determining how far a team could go. We just saw the news with Iowa State and Gilbert. That's big for the Clones. who I think easily could have made a run. They still could, but their ceiling probably isn't as high. Might be a little tougher now without Gilbert. But there was a lot of injuries from this past week, and we'll cover them and every single matchup on the podcast this week. Be out. We'll do one episode for the Thursday games. We'll do that Tuesday, and then we'll do another episode for the Friday games. That'll be out on Wednesday, and I believe we'll have a quick episode on the first four games that we will record tomorrow. I think the three-man weave will have an episode too, so we'll have you covered from all angles. But before we get to some looks in the individual regions, now is the best time to sign up for Bet365 if you haven't already. And it's now live in Illinois. By the way, Elite Eight Saturday, we'll have a little get together sponsored by Bet365. Joe's on Weed Street, myself, Jim Root, the other guys from the three-man weave, Kai and Matt will be there. We'll do an Elite Eight preview, live favorites recording. It's free. You got to RSVP. I'll tweet out the link again, but just come have some drinks, hang out, hopefully cash some tickets on that Saturday in a little less than 2 weeks. But for new Bet365 customers, including those in Illinois, you get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5. You can sign up using promo code ACTION. Just deposit $10 and place a bet for $5 to get $150 in bonus bets. Those bonus bets can be used on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, especially in Illinois. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. All right, let's start in the South region where Auburn is the favorite, right around, looking at one book here, right around even money to come out. You're in the Michigan State and Iowa State, who are both around 5-1. Texas A&M is 12-1. I could tell you that the first thing that jumped out to me, this is the first region I think that was revealed. I tweeted earlier this morning that when Yale won, that the best matchup for Yale will be Texas A&M. And as someone who has Texas A&M futures, of course, it's Yale versus Texas A&M. The reason being is because you got to shoot threes against the BYU defense, and Texas A&M obviously can't shoot. So that could be an interesting game. The other thing is that Texas A&M actually is one of the teams that I think could give Auburn a real scare. But can they get there is the question. But let's take a look at this region. Each give just a first look at a bet or a future or something that you like. Calabrese, I'll start with you.
I've been waiting really for weeks to fade Marquette, and I at least got a matchup that I like. I'm going to go New Mexico money line plus 150. I got the elite guard play to be able to match Cam Jones. Donovan Dent has been phenomenal for much of this season. He's the offensive engine for the Lobos, but the Lobos can also win the shot volume battle in two different ways. They can get after the Eagles on the offensive glass, and they can win the turnover margin. And really, when you look at these two teams since February 1st, despite the fact that one is from a mid-major league and the other is from the Big East, Marquette 45th, New Mexico 48th. So I think this is a lot closer to a coin flip game. So I'm happy to take the plus money on it. And also, when you look historically, this is the time of year to throw out some of the regular season stats and look at how teams perform in tournament settings. Shaka Smart, for as good as he's been as an underdog over the years, in terms of tournament play, 6 first-round exits as a head coach. So it's not something that would be a first time for him to get bounced right away. So I'll go ahead with the Lobos here.
Yeah, should control the boards in this game, but trusting a Mountain West team in the tournament, that's a dicey proposition based on recent history. Greg, what are you seeing here in the South?
Well, I'm going to take one from Calabrese's book, and I'm going to fade a Big East team because I haven't loved what I've seen from that conference in general. Even some of the quote-unquote big dogs that were supposed to challenge Rick Pitino and St. John's just couldn't get it done over a 20-game sample size this year. I've been looking to fade Creighton whenever possible for a couple of weeks now. And a Louisville team in Rupp Arena in round one is a spot I will absolutely take a stab at here. It's going to be a home game for Louisville. -2.5 is not nearly enough to spook me from just playing the number here. You think about the matchup at the guard spot. Creighton entirely dependent on Stephen Ashworth. He's very good. He's very, very good against really guards that can't provide any resistance or pressure. If he runs up against guys that can, sometimes I think he gets in over his head. Chucky Hepburn is one of the elite perimeter defenders in the country. I think he's going to win that matchup, or at least make it really, really difficult on Ashworth. And then on the flip side, I think you're going to see Kalk have to do some things he doesn't really like to do. He likes to sit in that drop coverage and have the historic block rate that we've always seen. Louisville is a team that will make him guard the perimeter at times in this game. And if you let the Louisville guards and wings get downhill with Kalk just kind of sitting there protecting the rim, I think there's going to be a lot of space for guys like Fat Edwards to operate, Javon Hadley to make some plays. This is a Louisville roster I just think has better players, more positional size, skill, talent everywhere outside of point guard and center. And the matchups for Creighton's point guard and center, I think, are a little frustrating, forcing them into tough spots they don't like. So for that reason, I'll take Louisville, and I really hope we get that Louisville-Auburn game in round 2.
And they should get Smith back as well, who was close this weekend. He's important for shooting, for spacing. Their offense just has a much higher ceiling when he is in the lineup. This is going to be, I think, partly it's going to be an anti-Greg show for me. Sorry, Greg, but I'm going with UC San Diego. It's the only early bet I placed. I pretty much knew I was going to bet them, no matter what. I have a feeling everyone is going to be on them. And here's the thing, people. People will say, "Oh, they're the trendy underdog. Everyone's picking them. They have no chance." This absolutely nothing to do with what happens. There's trendy underdogs that will lose. I remember coming on this show and touting Ohio and did it for 4 straight days against Virginia, and they were like the trendiest, I think, 13 ever, and then it ended up beating Virginia. So I'm not afraid of a trendy mid-major. The turnover disparity in this game will be devastating. UC San Diego should be able to force a ton of turnovers in Michigan, who can't take care of the ball. It's one of the things they had working for them today against Wisconsin, because Wisconsin doesn't force turnovers. Well, UC San Diego does. UC San Diego doesn't turn it over. Just from a shot volume perspective, they're going to be right in this. I love this UC San Diego team. They keep overperforming in the market. The market can't catch up to them. Number 1 against the spread team in the country. I think they were finished 78%. And I already mentioned Michigan, maybe that fatigue. 4th game in 8 days. They don't have great depth. So I like the Tritons to pull off the upset. I think this is basically a coin flip game. So I'll take the points there. Greg, do you have good feelings, bad feelings? This Michigan team, everyone wrote them off. They win a couple games. Are the vibes different now?
Well,
Are you afraid
see
of
the
this
banner
matchup?
behind me. Anything past this is gravy. No, I'm not going to come with any case against UC San Diego. That's been your team all year for good reason. This is a historically good mid-major team. They are everybody's darling for a reason. And it's a perfect matchup, as you laid out. The one thing UC San Diego is absolutely elite at is the one thing Michigan is diabolically bad at. The only thing I would push back on, I'll just reveal this. In my bracket, I'm going to have Michigan winning this game uncomfortably so. The Texas A&M matchup, if they get through Yale, to me is worse for Michigan. It's a horrible draw, though, to have the turnover disparity in game 1, then the offensive rebounding of the Aggies in game 2. There's your reward for winning 3 straight in the Big Ten tournament, I guess. But the pushback for me with San Diego is just this. They aren't huge in the front court. Like, they've got a great 2-point defense, the way they guard works, but 6'8" is still 6'8" when you see Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. I don't know that they're going to be as effective as the profile might indicate there. It will come down to turnovers. And if this is something like 22-3, it's night-night for San Diego. Michigan took care of it against Purdue, though, and Purdue's defense thrives on perimeter pressure as well. So I don't know. I don't blame you for the play, Stuck, but my heart will hurt when it happens.
Yeah, it's the turnover disparity. The turnover margin is going to be a huge factor in that game. So we'll see if Michigan can take care of it. See if they have tired legs and altitude. And if UC San Diego's offense also can beat you in just a multitude of ways. It's probably my favorite. I can't wait for that game. Are there times out for the games yet?
I think I saw it's late. It's like the 10 p.m. slot on
Oh,
Thursday.
Perfect.
Yeah, prime time, baby.
Get a good amount of drinks in before that one. All right, let's move on to the East region where Duke is the odds-on favorite, -120. Alabama, second 4-1. Arizona, 7-1. Wisconsin, 10-1. BYU, 19-1. First look here, Calabrese. I mean, I can tell you my first thought was out of all the top seeds, Duke, if healthy, which is the caveat there, I think has the easiest path, at least to the Elite Eight, but also probably to the Final Four. That was my first initial takeaway here. But what are you looking at in the East region?
Yeah, I'm with you on Duke. We're going to talk, Final Four and champions soon enough. Duke showed me so much with that flag. It's going to be hard to get in front of that runaway train. I'm going to go St. Mary's, laying 4.5 against Vandy. I mean, you can pick and choose when you think coaching experience matters, but Mark Byington has coached in 2 NCAA tournament games. Randy Bennett has coached in 15. And I think there's been a little bit of an overreaction in the past 2 tournament runs for the Gales that they've struggled in March. Well, they lost to Grand Canyon last year, which was a difficult athletic matchup for them. And then 2 years before that, it was UConn on their way to the national championship. So I don't think they're necessarily snake bit or have issues preparing for the NCAA tournament. And when you look at the past 6 weeks, St. Mary's is the 5th rated defense in the entire country. I think that's going to travel. They're also the 2nd team in the entire year when you look at the entire body of work in their away from home rating. That matters so much more to me because there's, obviously you're playing at neutral sites the entire time. How do you react to just the logistics of travel? How does your game, translate from opponent to opponent and potentially having stability and not just relying on the 3-point shot? It's nice if St. Mary's could make some threes, unlike that WCC final against the Zags, but they were still in that game despite going 0 from long range. So I think they got their worst game of the year out of their system. So I think this is going to be a nice bounce back for them, and they could be a trendy pick to make a deep run in this region.
Greg, what are you saying?
I'm going to jump on Baylor -1.5 against Mississippi State. Look, I'm not a huge Baylor guy this year, but I think they're a team that if they go up against a team that's a little chaotic defensively and not the most disciplined, they can really devour still with the offensive skill that they have. Mississippi State, to me, they really don't profile all that well on the defensive end. They have had everybody make threes against them this year. They're sort of just like a blocks and steals type team, but even when you add that together, like turnover rate's really the only thing in the green on their profile defensively at all. And Baylor takes care of it. They've got great guard play. I don't think turnovers are going to be a problem in that game. On the flip side, they're really Josh Hubbard dependent, and Josh Hubbard's a little guy, as we know. He could go nuclear, sure, but at least Baylor has multiple bodies they can throw at him defensively. Not that Baylor's the most disruptive defensive team, but I kind of just feel like it's 4-on-1 at the guard spot. I'll take the 4 with Baylor, with Scott Drew, a guy who's had some success in the tournament before. So to me, again, I don't think it's going anywhere past the first round. This is not an indication that I love anything beyond the first matchup, but I've loved fading this Mississippi State team all year. When they run up against the best of the best, they're 3-8 outright versus KenPom top 30. They really didn't pick up any marquee wins against the best teams in the SEC. And you remember last year in the tournament too, Mississippi State was kind of oh, will they, won't they? I don't know. It's an iffy Michigan State team. Michigan State just pantsed them in that game. I think we see the same from Baylor.
Could be a good game for Baylor to break out more of the Drew zone against Mississippi State, who can't shoot a lick. So interesting schematic matchup there. You have to worry a little bit about Mississippi State on the offensive glass, but I think Baylor can also do some damage on the offensive glass there. So I don't mind that one at first glance. Got to dig in a little further. I already mentioned this is anti-Greg show. So I went against Michigan. Your Wolverines on your first pick. I'm going to go against your Cougars in the second pick with VCU. Again, catching. I think the last line I saw was 3. I think it's a coin flip game. VCU is like a top 30 team. I think their physicality and pressure can really give this BYU offense issues, and they can force turnovers in this game, get some easy buckets. BYU is going to pack it in. VCU might not have much success in the offensive glass, which is a big path to their offense, but they have shooters. If they're on at all, I think they win this game. So I like getting some points with the Rams, despite the ugly game that I watched today between them and George Mason. Greg, where are you gonna have BYU going in your Elite Eight, Final
First
Four?
run at this, I do have them in the Elite Eight. I will say this: I am not nearly as spooked by the VCU matchup as a lot of the group chats I'm in with smart basketball people are. This was, you're right, Stuck. You're the same way you identified UC San Diego and identified this spot. These are the two I'm hearing most from smart people I trust on like schematically huge advantage underdog here. To me, I think it's overplaying how much BYU will struggle with the VCU physicality. This is not Houston. They're good. They force turnovers, but like Houston is the very best in terms of physical, terrifying nature, other than maybe Auburn that you're going to see. I think VCU can do that against teams in the A10. I think they could do that at times in this game, but like acting like Richie Saunders isn't still going to be able to get to the free throw line against a VCU team that's really physical, I think is a miss from me. Yegor Demon's got to play well. Certainly the path to a VCU victory is like 7+ turnovers from Demon, but he's been better lately in this huge win streak leading up to the Houston game. So I'll fade you here, Stuck. If we need to go back to the betting board, I'm game for it. But I have BYU going all the way to that Duke matchup in the Elite Eight.
All right, we'll talk about that on the podcast this week. Let's move to the Midwest region, where Houston is the favorite, plus 155 to come out of the Midwest. Tennessee plus 350. Gonzaga, the eight, is the third favorite at 8-1. Kentucky plus 850. Illinois plus 900. Purdue 11-1. That the first thing that jumps out here, obviously, is Houston. If you just go based on KenPom, they're ranked third, and they have a potential second round matchup with a team that's ranked ninth. So you have two top 10 KenPom teams there. So not the greatest draw for Houston. I actually was surprised that Gonzaga fell to an 8 after they won their conference tournament, but I thought they would move up to a 7. But definitely a dangerous 8. Calabrese, what are you seeing here in the Midwest?
The one that popped for me, having watched Kentucky in the SEC tournament, the way in which they got bounced, being so lifeless on the boards, not putting in the effort, not having the fundamentals. And here comes a Troy team catching double digits. It's 11 out in the market right now. They're fourth in offensive rebounding percentage in the entire country. Connor Way, their guard, is someone who I think can handle the physicality and the jump up, playing against better guards defensively. So I trust him to have the ball in his hands for the majority of this game. And the Trojans just play that modern way, that you should be playing basketball analytically. They're fifth in rim and 3-point rate. So I think there's an opportunity for them to be able to get some good looks, make their possessions worth it. And then on the offensive glass, get those second chance buckets. They also defensively really make you earn it in the half court. Fourth lowest points per possession when they settle into their half court defense. So can Kentucky have patience, be able to crack that half court defense and cut down on the mistakes that, essentially ended their chance at winning an SEC tournament title? I have my questions there. So I'm going to go ahead and take Troy. I think this number is too good. My projections would have it closer to 7. So anything north of 10, I think it's on for a Kentucky team that they've had some ghosts in recent tournaments and some early exits with some issues against teams that matched up well schematically against them. I think this is a repeat.
Yeah, Troy, well-coached team. They have an elite defense. They'll press at like 95th percentile. They'll mix up man and zone in the half court. They play zone, I think, at the 85th percentile. So they need to cause havoc and turnovers on defense. And so how healthy is Lamont Butler is also important for this particular matchup. Expect them to play, but is there rust there? But a really good shot volume team because they crashed the offensive glass, fifth nationally there, as you mentioned. They forced turnovers at a top 50 rate. Defense doesn't allow anything in the post and an elite pick and roll D, but they though I do worry about them because Kentucky could just shoot the lights out from three because they're vulnerable there. I am also curious if Kentucky hasn't really played zone this year at all. Will Pope break out any zone? Because you can zone Troy to death. Like Troy needs to score at the rim if they're not getting steals, which might be tough. And they shoot a ton of threes, but they don't make them. They just have a bunch of like 29% three-point shooters chucking them up. Uh, so unless Cooper Campbell's the one exception, but when he's in there and not Rigsby, then their defense takes a hit. So yeah, really interesting schematic matchup. Troy can be feisty just because of their shot volume profile, and obviously Kentucky profiles as a potential vulnerable top seed. If they're on and going nuclear from three, which is higher likely to happen against Troy, then they're going to beat a team like this. But yeah, things could get dicey for Kentucky certainly in this matchup. Greg, what are you looking at in the Midwest?
I'm going to take High Point plus the points plus 9.5, and I think they're going to win the game. And my initial glance at this, I'm going to dig into it a little bit more, but High Point is the Cinderella that I had sort of targeted pre-tournament in addition to San Diego. And I think they have everything you need to make a deep run in this tournament. They've got a bunch of high major talent. You can go through the names, but Kamani Hamilton played at Mississippi State. Demorian Williams at Texas Tech. Pettiford was a Kansas recruit back in the day, 5-star. He comes off the bench for this High Point team. They just got dudes. You watch this team, they don't have the look and feel of a mid-major, and you look and feel Purdue when you watch them play. There's a lot of guys that play for Purdue that aren't Trey Kaufman, Renner, Braden Smith, who do feel pretty mid-majory. I think the athleticism, the profile of this team is a huge advantage for them, and they can really exploit Purdue's horrible 2-point percentage defense. Purdue has zero rim protection. That's been the story all season. They had a month-long stretch at the end of January where they looked like they had solved it by being this super high-pressure defense, but all that did was wear their superstar down, and Braden Smith's been pretty damn bad for the last 3 weeks. So I think High Point's 15th best 2-point percentage offense is going to completely feast in this game. And then on the flip side, I expect them to hold up okay internally. Now, it's easier said than done. Kaufman Wren could get 30 against anybody at this point, but they have a legitimate 7-footer in Bodo Bodo. I think size has disrupted TKR against Michigan's front court. Just Vlad Golden being 7 feet tall really hurt him in the Big Ten tournament matchup. So this Purdue team's been running on fumes. They've had a couple days to get it together, but if you play the message board game, there are rumors that Braden Smith's looking elsewhere for his next season in college basketball. Vibes are weird with this Purdue team, and I think High Point is the perfect profile to take advantage.
That was a real report.
Wouldn't call it a report. Would call it rumblings
Hmm.
that I do believe are very real. I think there's some seeking out of that.
Interesting. Nothing really jumped out at me at first glance without going into all these games. But one look that I might consider is Purdue High Point over. I mean, the pace might not be great, and it's a pretty high number. I think, what did I see? 154. But Braden Smith against the High Point drop, and this High Point defense is not good. And they haven't played any offense of this caliber. I think the only team that they played that's in the field, they didn't play any power conference teams this year. I think the only team that they played in the field is Norfolk State, and I think they gave up like 75 in that game. So yeah, and this Purdue defense has issues that I think High Point can exploit in a multitude of ways. So I think that game profiles as an over. I think both offenses have many paths to success. All right, let's move on to, well, I guess before we move on to the West, quick break for an ad read. March, of course, is the best month of the year, not just for sports, but also for getting the best deal on Action Pro. You can get Action Pro for just over $5 a month for the entire year. And for the NCAA tournament, you'll get Sean Kerner's bracket simulations, Nick Giffin's player props, which are always money throughout March. I think he was like 80% last March. And if you care, our picks 30 minutes before they go out to everyone else. Go to actionnetwork.com/March now to get on board. That's actionnetwork.com/March. All right, let's get to the West region where Florida, everyone's now picked. All I'm seeing on Twitter is Florida's winning it all. Pretty wild. This is a team of like four, I think four of their starters used to be at mid majors. They've all come together and then some. Florida -110 to win this region. Texas Tech 5-1, St. John's 6-1, Maryland 10-1, Kansas 13-1, Missouri 14-1. Pretty tough draw in the West. I mean, Florida's been so good. Texas Tech, I think, when healthy, and I'm hearing that they should be fully healthy, I think they're a top 5 team. St. John's, we've all seen how dominant they were throughout the Big East season. Maryland, one of the best starting fives in the country. I mean, those top 4 teams, that's as tough as it gets for a region, I think, in the tourney this year. Calabrese, what are you seeing in the West region?
I agree. I think this is the region of death. I think you can make a strong argument. If I knew 100% that Texas Tech would be healthy and that, they get their legs back against UNC Wilmington and then they are back to being at full strength, hitting on all cylinders, I would probably pick them. But because there's a little bit of uncertainty and you kind of have to take the word for it, and assuming that everyone comes back at 100%, we'll get into this shortly in terms of my Final Four pick. But overall, yeah, this is an incredible region, top to bottom. I'm ready to get hurt again. I'm going with Drake, this time not on the money line after getting burned, 2 years in a row. I'll take the points against Mizzou, 6.5. Big coaching mismatch, in my opinion, here. Ben McCollum, a 5-time Division II Coach of the Year against Dennis Gates, who has won one NCAA tournament game. Drake, by the way, getting 6.5 here. They lost one game by more than 6 all season long. And in terms of the tournament field, when you look at teams who play better against better competition, Drake is the 5th best team in that metric per Evan Mia. So I don't think they're going to be scared, in a game like this. But it really just comes down to tempo. Mizzou doesn't play at a lightning tempo, but they can be sped up. And certainly they're a team that hangs their hat on the offensive end. But if Drake slows it down to their preferred pace, which is a snail's pace, I think this is going to get dicey in the second half for Mizzou. Every possession takes on increased importance when you're playing at a low possession rate. And Mizzou also, I think, to be able to spur their fast break offense. They score about 13 points per game in transition. They got to be able to turn over Bennett Sturts, who's going to have the ball in his hands for the majority of this game. I trust this kid. Watched probably 10 to 15 of Drake's games this year in the Valley. He was somebody in every single game that they played tough. A lot of those games went to overtime. He had the ball in crunch time, and he just gives me the vibes of a March hero, someone who can handle the pressure, can score for himself, certainly facilitate for his teammates. So this is a Drake team that was phenomenal, really start to finish this season. 6.5, I think, is too rich. Anything north of 2 possessions, you got to go with the Bulldogs here.
Yeah, interesting schematic matchup. I like Drake's definitely going to slow the game down, keep Missouri out of transition where they want to get pick and roll defense, which is obviously always big against Drake and Sturts. It can be tough to run pick and roll against Missouri and some of their defenses. They'll change up their defenses a lot. Against the roll man, they were really bad this year, but against the ball handler, they were really good. But Drake will definitely control tempo. They will just grind every possession down to the final seconds. And Missouri, for what it's worth, got to dig in further here, but they were very poor late in the shot clock on defense. Mark Mitchell, I believe he will be fully healthy. He could do some damage on the low block against Drake. It was not really great at the rim if you're not turning it over. Fascinating X's and O's matchup. Can't wait to dive into that one a little more. Greg, what are you looking at in the West?
Guys, I want to take you back to Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. That was when Nico Medved and Colorado State got their first NCAA tournament win of the Medved tenure. He was playing a head coach who at the time knew that he was not going to be the head coach anymore. He was 2 feet out the door, and we didn't know. That was Tony Bennett of the Virginia Cavaliers. And now I'd like to bring it full circle by acknowledging the fact that Nico Medved is now 2 feet out the door. There's nobody reporting this, but guess what? The transfer portal's cooking already. And if you want to get a start at your new Minnesota Golden Gophers program that we all expect Nico to take the job at, the longer you play in the NCAA tournament, the worse that is for you. He doesn't have to do anything here. He doesn't have to win the job that he wants. That's his dream program. He's already got it coming, and he knows that. You're giving me plus money for a Memphis team that I think this is just disrespectful. I understand Tyrese Hunter is injured. They have the best player on the floor. PJ Haggerty is the best shooting guard in college basketball. Nick Clifford is phenomenal. But we've seen this Memphis team get up for some big moments this year. Think back to Maui. They were pretty stellar in that tournament. And I can't shake the Mountain West's constant issues in this tournament. I know Colorado State just had a special run to the conference title, cut down the nets. That's great. To me, profile-wise, I couldn't believe that this was not Colorado State plus 130 instead of Memphis as an underdog here. The only big vulnerability on the sheet for me for Memphis is defensive rebounding. Colorado State can't take advantage. They're 279th. That's not really what they do. The first game without Hunter went completely fine in the championship game in the conference tournament. If anything, they're going to go bigger without Hunter, and I think that honestly could help them with the Nick Clifford matchup. So I'll take the quote-unquote underdog that got the 5 seed here, one of the more overseeded teams in the tournament, but the team with the best player on the floor in Haggerty and the Memphis Tigers.
Yeah, Memphis also has major turnover issues. Colorado State doesn't really turn you over on defense. There's no question that they are playing. Colorado State is playing really good basketball of late. But Dane Danger also has been just a monster for Memphis, especially of late. Although it is worth mentioning, if this could come into play in a close game, Danger has completely forgotten how to shoot a free throw. I mean, it's stunning. I mean, he was never a good free throw shooter. Probably like 60% for his career. Looking at the last 4 games, he went 0 of 5, 4 of 6, 3 of 13, and 0 of 4. So what is that? 0 of 9, 3 of 22. Like he's about like 25% over his past 5 games, and they just look horrendous. Something to keep in mind if it's a really close game, because
he's got to go with the Wofford kids granny shots. I think there's time to practice before the round of 64 game. Just flip it up a little bit.
That is one of the most. I'm glad that you brought that up. That we will get to watch some Rick Barry granny shots with Kyler Filowich of Wofford. Electric. Like imagine if. Well, I don't. It's gonna be hard for them to be in the game late. But imagine if he has like free throws to tie it late. Be just must-see TV. For me, I'm gonna go Texas Tech to win the region 5-1. I think they have a good path to the Sweet 16, and I think they actually match up pretty well with St. John's. And I do have Florida rated higher, but I don't have the gap that wide. I think Texas Tech's top 5 team in the country when healthy. And from what I'm hearing, they will be fully healthy. So I'm going with Texas Tech to come out of this region. So that's a spoiler for one of my Final Four picks. We'll get to all of our Final Four picks in just a moment. But first, favorite upset of the first round. Calabrese, you're going to go where I'm also going to go.
Yeah, give me the Tritons over the Wolverines. Congrats on your Big Ten Conference Championship title, Michigan. 2 of the last 3 have lost in the round of 64, Iowa and Purdue in recent years. So it has not been a springboard to March Madness success necessarily. And as we hit on, Michigan is super sloppy with the basketball, which plays right into the Tritons' hands. Yes, they're going to be undersized, and I think there's going to be some issues defending Michigan's pick and roll with Wolf and Golden. But if they turn it over 15 or 20 times in this game, I think there's an opportunity for San Diego to really jump on them. This is a team that won over 30 games. They're on this incredible streak, and they were also challenged at the very end in the Big West title game against a UC Irvine team that their biggest thing was interior defense with a 7-1 big who was, basically altered shots, was difficult to deal with on the offensive glass, and they were able to navigate that and win that one going away in the second half. So I think that's a perfect warm up for them to be able to handle the Big Ten tournament champs. So give me UC San Diego.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, could they lose this game? Absolutely. I just think it's a coin flip game from where I have these teams rated, throw in the rest, the turnover issues. Yeah, Michigan's size could definitely be an issue at times at the rim against UC San Diego for sure. But I think they'll have paths to offense here in a multitude of ways. So that's where I'm going as well. It's my favorite upset as of now. Although, if you're looking for eight in 13 seeds have won a game in the first round in the past 8 tournaments. So last year it was Yale over Auburn. And Yale, if you're looking for a 13, I don't think Yale is a bad option in your bracket. That little pot of UC San Diego, Michigan, Texas A&M, Yale, like it's super fascinating. Like I think, like I said, Texas A&M could give Auburn issues, but could they even get out of the first round? Like so, but Texas A&M, Yale is going to just go under everything. They're going to force a ton of threes. Texas A&M can't shoot. Yale can compete on the defensive glass. Yale does have a lot of shooters, and if Polkitis is on, it could be trouble for A&M for sure. But I'll go with UC San Diego for now. At the buzzer, one final. Oh, well, I guess I'll ask you guys this before we get to our final four picks. Do you have any just off the cuff? I'll put you on the spot. Are there any like crazy upsets that you could see? Like you have to go 13, at least a 13 seed. Is there anyone that you could see? There's usually one that no one sees coming.
All right, but before we hop into that, let's flip it to Greg for his upset pick, because then I have a big one. I'm going to turn my back on a coach and a team that I've been backing all season long, but I'm ready to get off the ride. But Greg, what's your upset for the round of 64?
I did hit on it in the favorite play of the region already, but I'm taking High Point. I think they beat Purdue outright. I couldn't jump off the Purdue bandwagon quick enough at this point. The only other one I would add, I think you mentioned it briefly, Stuck, but I think there's a world that Kentucky goes down to Troy, and then the internet bursts into flames when Kentucky fans find out that Mark Pope is not a great NCAA tournament coach historically.
Yeah, I mean, maybe uh, I was thinking Montana just because of the Wisconsin spot and their legs, but Big Sky teams are horrendous in the tournament. 3-39 since 1985. They haven't beat a high major team since 1999. With I think that was Howard Arsenault and Weber State. Montana, like they want to get to the rim. They have no size, and so even they do take away the three, but yeah, I can't go Montana. Even
For
though it is a
super
true.
long, maybe Lipscomb, just given
Yeah,
no Gilbert.
Lipscomb was my pick. I mean, Iowa
Oh,
State. We talked about it all year long. It's like, when Momcilovic and, this whole lineup is there, and when you have the sixth man of the year coming off the bench and not being forced into starter minutes and blah, blah, blah. Well, now Keyshawn Gilbert's out for the tournament, and Lipscomb, one of their calling cards is they are so disciplined they never foul. So that what they're going to do is say, all right, Iowa State with these, with one starter out, with just a go-to potential NBA player not available, beat us, and we're not going to give you free points at the charity stripe. I think this has all the makings of an early exit for an Iowa State team that, coming out of Maui, we looked at them as a team that could absolutely win the national championship. They get into that, even that battle with BYU a couple games ago where they forced 30 turnovers and still somehow lose that game at Hilton. I still had hope that with a full deck, they could make a deep run, but I am off the wagon right now. So in terms of a 14 or higher, I think you could do a lot worse than Lipscomb to win it.
Yeah, I could see it just because of their profile. I mean, they take good care of the ball. They run beautiful. They run beautiful offense, and they have shooters all over. Run beautiful motion, and that's what you have to do against Iowa State. Move the ball, hit some threes. You mentioned they don't foul. They're good on the defensive glass. talent disparity is going to be pretty big. But yeah, Iowa State just with this lineup in constant flux and like what is going on with the team. And so if Lipscomb is hitting their threes, which they'll shoot plenty of and they make plenty of them, could be some trouble for Iowa State. Iowa State has a major turnover issues, but that is one thing that Lipscomb won't, pretty passive D, won't really exploit. But I don't hate that as far as a super long shot. But one final order of business before we go and dive into these games before the podcast over the next couple days. Also, Action Network app will have a bunch of stuff there previewing every single one of these games. I'll have some high level stuff too, going over like profiles of teams, ranking the upset chances of the 13 through 15 seeds, stuff that I do every year that'll be up in the next day or two. But let's give our first edition. That's what I'm calling it for mine. If you want to just say you're locking yours in, and you want to be bold, more power to you. But let's give our first edition of our Final Four and our national champion. Calabrese, I'll start with you.
I will go Auburn playing St. John's in the national semifinal, Duke against Tennessee, and Duke over Auburn for the Natty. I've basically been banging the drums. They were the best two teams. We talked about the potential of betting them. I think it was at plus 165 versus the field. DraftKings was offering that. So just essentially looking at these two teams and the fact that we're going to get flagged back and what Duke showed me in the ACC tournament without them, I feel comfortable there. And Houston, they have just been on the warpath, but the committee just absolutely hosed them. You mentioned it. There's going to be a top 10 Ken Pom matchup awaiting them in the round of 32. That is not what they deserved after playing like one of the best teams in the entire country for the past 3 months. But that rough road, I think, could, essentially knock them off before they can even get to an Elite Eight matchup against Tennessee. I really like what Tennessee's guards have shown me down the stretch, and I think it'll be enough for them to get to the Final Four.
Also, is Roberts fully healthy? That's a question. There's so many. We'll go through all of them on the podcast, but for Houston, is he fully healthy? All right, so you're going Duke over Auburn. Oh, so you're trusting, you're on this show, you've gave out New Mexico, Mountain West team, and now you're trusting Rick Barnes to get to the Final Four?
Hey, Rick Barnes, I called when he went out in last year's tournament. I brought it up ad nauseum that he struggles in tournament play, but he showed me something in the last month with this team that gets to the SEC final. And like I said, that guard play, they needed, offensively for them to take a step forward. And just when I look at the path, because so much about what we're discussing here is path dependent. I'm not afraid of Utah State or UCLA in the round of 32. If it's just chalk, it's Kentucky awaiting them in the Sweet 16. Whereas Houston has to go through the Zags and potentially Clemson. I think Tennessee, it's just too good to pass up for a team that, yes, historically Barnes has struggled a little bit and done less with more. I mean, hell, he had Kevin Durant and couldn't get past the round of 32. So yes, I'm switching horses here. Hey, I just spent the entire year not saying anything bad about Tem and Lipsy after spending 20, 23, 24 dumping on him. I'm off the Iowa State wagon. I'm trying to balance out the mojo here going into at least the first week of the tournament.
All right, Greg, I'm looking at yours, but you guys are almost the exact same Final Fours. Chalk City here. What do you got?
It is Chalk City. I don't feel the best about it. I don't love doing that, but I think it's the story of the season. I've talked about it a lot on BBOC this year. I think there are four pretty genuinely elite college basketball teams that would have held up extremely well in the past 15 years of this sport. It just is what it is, and they're all in different regions, and you can try and talk yourself into different angles, like what is happening with Auburn in the last four games. That's the spookiest thing, I think, for a one seed to me. The Roberts injury for Houston. Florida has been so good. I don't know what you can nitpick really. And then Duke is Duke, even without Cooper Flag. They had no issues right now. To me, I'm going chalk. Other than I'm going St. John's over Florida. I really think the Johnnies physically have what it takes to get through that region. I think as much as the headlines of Bill Self or John Calipari are fun, St. John's should physically destroy those teams if they get to a potential round of 32 matchup there. Once you get past that Final Four, I am going to take the Johnnies to beat Auburn simply because I do think there's some volatility with Auburn, and I don't love the fact that they have to go through Louisville in the round of 32. As you mentioned, if A&M does find their way to a Sweet 16, I think that's a team that can beat Auburn. We already saw that a week and a half ago. So I'm probably least confident in Auburn to actually get there out of my Final Four. I have Duke running the table. Don't even think twice about it for 1 second. Duke versus St. John's in the title game. I honestly expect a Duke blowout at this point, as much as that's not fun for the casual college basketball viewer.
Well, St. John's, similar to you mentioned against Auburn, similar to Texas A&M, can just like just crush Auburn on the offensive glass, which is definitely noteworthy. All right, I'm not going to be as chalky. I would have considered Iowa State at full strength, getting their revenge over Auburn from earlier this season, but there's just too much uncertainty now. So for now, I'm going Auburn. I'm going Texas Tech. I already mentioned them. Duke, who I think has the easiest path. And then my crazy one is I'm just buying the upside of Illinois, which means they will lose in the first round. I fully admit they could either lose in the first round, but they could get out of that bottom half. Like that bottom half is pretty wide open. Illinois, such an inconsistent team. Can they put it together for four? We'll see. But that's what I'm going with. Auburn, Texas Tech, Duke, Illinois. I'll say for now, Texas Tech is my winner. Guns up. All right. That'll do it for us. It's time to go really dive into these games. Thanks to Greg and Mike for joining me. Thanks to our producer, Gifford on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Thanks to our sponsor, Bet365. Reminder, Big Bets on Campus. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we'll have a bunch of episodes coming out over the next 2 days. Chicago, Elite 8 Saturday. Joe's on Wheat Street. Make sure you RSVP to that if you want to join us there. It's free. And we'll have some live shows throughout the tournament. But thanks for tuning in. Good luck and happy bracket hunting. We'll see y'all later in the week. Cheers.